Do not call me your boyfriend tonight. Ryan said it quietly as our rideshare stopped beneath the glowing entrance of a hotel in downtown Chicago, and somehow those 7 words hurt more than they had the first time. I looked through the window at people in suits and evening dresses walking toward the marketing gala while cold November rain streaked across the glass. I know, I said. Ryan turned toward me. At 30, he had mastered the kind of calm expression that made clients trust him before he finished introducing himself. Tonight, though, I could see the tension around his blue eyes. Noah, I am sorry. You already explained. It is a work event. There are executives here, clients, people who know my family. I just need tonight to be simple. I almost laughed at the word simple. Ryan and I had been together for 11 months. I had a toothbrush in his apartment, a drawer beneath his dresser, and a key on my ring. He knew I hated raisins, remembered exactly how I took my coffee, and texted me every morning before I reached my graphic design studio. Behind closed doors, nothing about us felt uncertain. Outside them, I became his friend. Sometimes his buddy. Once, painfully, a guy he knew from around the neighborhood. What should I say if somebody asks how we know each other? I asked. Ryan looked down. Just say we are friends. There it was again. The small sentence that erased almost a year of my life. The driver glanced toward the mirror, and I suddenly felt embarrassed that a stranger had heard more truth about our relationship than most people Ryan knew. All right, I said. Ryan reached toward my hand, then stopped when he remembered where we were. That hesitation hurt more than if he had never moved at all. I love you, he said softly. I believed him. That was the problem. If I had thought Ryan was using me, leaving would have been easy. But I had seen him drive 40 minutes across Chicago because I had the flu and needed groceries. I had watched him spend an entire Sunday helping me rebuild my portfolio website, even though he hated working on weekends. I knew the version of Ryan who danced badly while making breakfast and fell asleep halfway. Through movies he insisted on choosing. That man loved me without hesitation. The man opening the car door was afraid anyone might notice. We stepped onto the sidewalk beneath the hotel awning. Ryan adjusted his jacket and immediately became the polished marketing director everyone expected. I stood beside him, close enough to remember how his hand felt in mine and far enough that nobody would guess it belonged there. Ready? He asked. I looked through the glass doors at a ballroom filled with people who knew almost everything about Ryan Mitchell except the person he came home to. Sure. We walked inside. Within minutes, coworkers surrounded him. Ryan introduced me exactly as promised. This is Noah, my friend. I smiled, shook hands, and told myself I could survive one more evening. Then a woman from Ryan's department grinned at him and asked, So, Ryan, are you finally seeing anyone? I watched his expression change for less than a second. He glanced at me. Our eyes met across 3 feet of crowded ballroom floor. He could have avoided the question. He could have laughed. He could have told some harmless version of the truth. Instead, Ryan smiled at her and said, No, I am still single. And that was the moment I realized being loved in private was starting to feel exactly like being erased in public. For the rest of the gala, I performed the role Ryan had given me. I smiled when his coworkers included me in conversation, laughed when appropriate, and answered questions about my design work as though nothing had happened. Ryan stayed within sight almost the entire time. Every few minutes, his eyes found mine across the ballroom, but I stopped giving him the reassuring smile I usually offered. I was tired of helping him feel comfortable with something that was slowly making me miserable. The strange part was that our relationship had never felt fake when we were alone. The previous Sunday, I had woken in Ryan's apartment to the smell of coffee and found him in the kitchen making pancakes. He had remembered that I had an important client presentation Monday morning and spent breakfast convincing me I was prepared. When I left, he packed leftovers into a container because he knew I would probably work through lunch. There were hundreds of moments like that. Ryan kept my favorite sparkling water in his refrigerator. He knew which songs I played when deadlines made me anxious. When my laptop failed 2 months earlier, he stayed beside me until nearly midnight while I recovered my files. He never made me question whether I mattered until someone else entered the room. Near 10 that evening, I stepped away from the ballroom and found a quiet hallway beside the hotel conference rooms. Through the windows, Chicago lights reflected against wet pavement 30 floors below. I had been alone for less than a minute when Ryan appeared. There you are. Here I am. He stopped several feet away. You have barely spoken to me. You have barely been allowed to know me tonight. His expression tightened. Noah, you told them you were single. I panicked. I was standing right there. I know. Ryan lowered his voice even though nobody was nearby. I should not have said that. But you did. He looked toward the ballroom entrance. Even now, some part of him was checking whether anyone could see us. I noticed, and I hated that I noticed. How long are we going to do this? I asked. I told you I need time. 11 months is time, Ryan. Coming out is not something I can do because somebody gives me a deadline. I am not giving you one. Then what are you asking? I looked at him. I am asking whether there is ever going to be room for me in the rest of your life. Ryan's face softened. You are in my life. Am I? I kept my voice calm. Your coworkers think you are single. Your parents think I am some friend you occasionally mention. Your sister knows my name, but she does not know why I am at your apartment 4 nights a week. Every important person in your life knows a version of you where I do not exist. That does not mean I do not love you. I know you love me. The word surprised him. That is what makes this harder. Ryan took one cautious step closer. When it is just us, you make me feel like I belong with you. Then we walk through a door like that one, and suddenly I have to remember which version of our relationship I am supposed to pretend is true. Ryan looked down, and for several seconds neither of us spoke. Music and distant laughter drifted from the ballroom. Finally, he said, I am scared. It was the first time he had said it that plainly. My anger softened, but the hurt remained. I know. Ryan looked at me again. Can we go home and talk? I wanted to say yes immediately because home was where Ryan always became the man I trusted. Instead, I glanced toward the ballroom full of people who believed he was single. Yes, I said quietly. But tonight you are going to have to listen to why being your secret is starting to hurt more than losing you scares me. The ride back to Ryan's apartment took 20 minutes, and neither of us said much. Chicago moved past the windows in wet streaks of white and red light, while I watched Ryan's reflection in the glass. He looked exhausted, but I refused to rescue him from the silence. For 11 months, I had made his fear easier to carry. Tonight, I needed him to understand what that had cost me. When we reached his apartment, Ryan unlocked the door and stepped aside for me. Everything inside looked painfully familiar. My sneakers were beside his entryway bench. The blue ceramic mug I always used sat in the drying rack. A framed print I had designed hung above his couch because Ryan had insisted it belonged there. There were traces of me everywhere, yet none of the people closest to him knew what those traces meant. Ryan removed his jacket and turned toward me. I am listening. I stayed near the kitchen counter. When we started dating, you told me you were private. I thought I was. So did I. Privacy sounded reasonable. I did not need photographs online or announcements at work. I did not need strangers knowing anything about us. Ryan nodded slowly. But this is different. I know. Do you? I asked. Because tonight somebody asked if you were seeing anyone, and you did not protect our privacy. You denied our relationship. Ryan looked down. I panicked. I believe you. But panic still has consequences. He leaned against the opposite counter, leaving several feet between us. My parents have had this picture of my life since I was a kid. Career, marriage, children, everything in the right order. My father still talks about me eventually bringing home the perfect woman. At work, I spent years becoming the person everyone expects me to be. Sometimes I feel like telling the truth would change every room I walk into. For the first time that night, I heard something beneath his fear that was not simply avoidance. Ryan had built a life around expectations, and now he did not know how to step outside them without imagining everything collapsing. I softened, but I did not surrender my point. I am not asking you to walk into your office tomorrow and make an announcement. I know. I am not asking you to tell your parents before you are ready. I am asking you to stop making me participate in the lie. Ryan looked at me. What does that mean? It means I cannot stand beside you while you tell people you are single. I cannot keep meeting people who matter to you and pretending I am just some friend. There is a difference between keeping something private and keeping someone secret. His eyes stayed on mine. And you feel like a secret. I am a secret. The sentence landed between us with uncomfortable clarity. Ryan rubbed a hand across his face. I never wanted you to feel ashamed. I do not feel ashamed of us. I paused. Sometimes I wonder if you do. His head lifted immediately. No, never. Then I need your actions to stop telling me something different. Ryan crossed the room slowly and stopped a few feet away. I love you, Noah. I love you too. He seemed relieved until I continued. But love cannot be the only place where we tell the truth. Ryan became quiet. I picked up my overnight bag from beside the couch. His expression changed. Where are you going? Home. Are we breaking up? I looked at the man I loved, standing in an apartment filled with evidence of a relationship nobody else was allowed to see. Not tonight, I said. But I need you to understand something. I am not asking you to choose between me and everyone else. I am asking whether someday, when those worlds finally meet, you will still choose to stand beside me. For the next 4 days, Ryan and I moved around each other carefully. We still exchanged morning messages, but they were shorter. He asked whether I had eaten lunch. I asked how his presentation went. Neither of us mentioned the gala or the conversation in his apartment. Then Thursday evening, while I was finishing revisions for a restaurant branding project, Ryan called. My mother's birthday dinner is Saturday, he said. I leaned back in my desk chair. Okay. She asked if you were coming. That surprised me. I had met his mother twice, both times as Ryan's friend. She was warm, funny, and completely unaware that the man sitting beside her son at dinner knew where Ryan kept the spare coffee filters. What did you tell her? That I would ask you. I stared at the unfinished logo on my monitor. And if I come, who am I? Ryan was silent long enough that I already knew the answer. Noah. That is my name, not my role. I know. He exhaled. I want you there. I almost declined, but another part of me needed to understand what Ryan was actually afraid of. All right, I said. Saturday evening, we drove about 12 miles north to his parents' house in Evanston. Ryan was unusually quiet. Before we went inside, he looked at me. For one hopeful second, I thought he might tell me something had changed. Instead, he said, "Thank you for coming." His mother opened the door before we reached it and immediately pulled Ryan into a hug. Then she smiled at me. Noah, I am so glad you came. Inside, the house smelled like roasted chicken and cinnamon candles. Ryan's father asked about my design work. His younger sister, Emily, remembered a recommendation I had given her for a drawing tablet. Nobody treated me badly. That somehow made Ryan's fear harder for me to understand. During dinner, his mother told embarrassing childhood stories while Ryan protested, and everyone laughed. I watched him relax around his family, and I could see how much he loved them. I also understood why the possibility of changing their perception frightened him. After dinner, Emily brought out a birthday cake. While we gathered around the dining room, Ryan's mother looked at me and said, "You know, Ryan talks about you all the time." Ryan nearly dropped the stack of plates he was carrying. "Mom." She laughed. "What? You do?" I looked at Ryan. His face had gone still. "He is lucky to have such a good friend," she added. There it was again, spoken kindly this time, which somehow made it hurt more. Ryan could have corrected her with 5 words. He could have said, "He is my boyfriend, actually." Instead, he smiled tightly and changed the subject. Later, everyone gathered in the living room for photographs. Emily positioned us near the fireplace. I naturally stood beside Ryan. For a second, his shoulder rested against mine. Then he glanced toward his parents and shifted several inches away. It was such a small movement that nobody else noticed. I did. The camera flashed. Everyone smiled. I smiled too, but something inside me finally became clear. Ryan was not only hiding our relationship from other people. He had become so practiced at hiding it that even his body knew when to create distance. On the drive back to Chicago, I watched the highway lights pass outside my window. Ryan finally asked, "Are you okay?" I turned toward him. "Your family seems to like me." "They do. That is what scares me, Ryan. Tonight was not terrible. Nobody was cruel. Nothing happened. You were afraid of what might happen. So you made the decision for everyone before they ever had a chance to know the truth." He tightened his hands around the steering wheel. "You do not know how they will react. Neither do you." Ryan had no answer. I looked forward again, realizing the hardest person Ryan needed to tell the truth to might not be his family at all. It might be himself. The photograph from Ryan's mother's birthday appeared in our group chat the next morning. Emily had sent several pictures with cheerful comments about everyone looking surprisingly presentable after cake. I opened the image where Ryan and I stood near the fireplace and stared at the space between us. It was only several inches, nothing anyone else would question, but I remembered exactly how that space had appeared. 1 second his shoulder had been against mine. The next, he had noticed the camera and moved away. I saved the photograph without knowing why. By Monday, Ryan and I had returned to something resembling our normal routine. He brought coffee to my studio before work, and that evening we ordered Thai food at his apartment. He asked about my restaurant branding project. I asked about a campaign his team was launching. We laughed twice. For almost an hour, I could pretend everything was fine. Then Ryan's phone lit up on the coffee table. His mother had sent him another photograph from Saturday, this one showing the entire family with me standing at the far end. Ryan smiled at it. Mom said this might be the first picture where Dad did not blink. I looked at the screen. Where does she think I fit in that picture? Ryan's smile disappeared. Noah, I am serious. He set down his phone. Can we not do this tonight? That is what we keep doing. We keep not doing this. Ryan leaned back against the couch. I am trying. What does trying look like? He did not answer. I reached for my own phone and opened the photograph Emily had sent. Look at us. Ryan studied the image. What am I supposed to see? The moment before this picture was taken, you were standing against me. Then you saw the camera. His expression changed. He remembered. I did not even think about it. Exactly. My voice remained quiet. You did not have to think. You have practiced hiding us so long that moving away from me became automatic. Ryan stared at the photograph. For once, he did not defend himself. I am sorry. I know. I mean it. I know that too. I put my phone down. But apologies are starting to sound like promises that nothing will change. Ryan looked hurt, and part of me wanted to take the sentence back. I did not. What do you want me to do? He asked. I cannot write instructions for you. Then help me understand. I took a moment before answering. I want to stop calculating who is watching before I stand beside you. I want to meet someone important to you without memorizing a cover story. I want a photograph with you where neither of us has to wonder whether we look too close. Ryan lowered his eyes. That sounds so simple when you say it. It should be simple. It is not. For me. I know. But difficult and impossible are not the same thing. The apartment became quiet except for traffic outside. Finally, Ryan said, when I imagine telling my parents, I hear every question before they ask it. When I imagine telling people at work, I wonder whether they will look at me differently. I know that sounds cowardly. It sounds scared. He looked at me. Is there a difference? Yes. Fear is something you feel. What you do because of it is a choice. Ryan absorbed that without arguing. I stood and carried our empty containers toward the kitchen. Behind me, he said, I do not want to lose you. I stopped. Then stop asking me to disappear so you can keep everything else exactly the same. When I turned around, Ryan was still holding the family photograph on his phone, staring at those few carefully created inches between us as if he were finally seeing them for the first time. 2 days passed after that conversation, and something between us changed without either of us naming it. Ryan still sent his usual morning message, but I stopped spending every evening at his apartment. I needed enough distance to hear my own thoughts without immediately softening whenever he looked worried. On Wednesday night, I stayed late at my studio finishing revisions while snow began drifting past the windows. Around 8, Ryan called. Are you still working? For another hour. Can I bring dinner? I almost said yes automatically. Instead, I looked at the quiet studio around me. Not tonight. There was a pause. Okay. He sounded disappointed, but he did not argue. I will call you tomorrow. After we hung up, I realized how unfamiliar it felt to choose my own comfort before his fear. The next evening, Ryan came to my apartment. He stood outside holding 2 coffees and wearing the expression of someone who had rehearsed a conversation during the entire drive. I let him in. I talked to Emily today, he said before he even removed his coat. My heart jumped. About us. Not exactly. The hope disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Ryan noticed. I tried Noah. What happened? He sat at my kitchen table. She asked why I had been distracted. I wanted to tell her. I had the words ready. Then I imagined everything changing after I said them, and I could not do it. I sat across from him. What did you say instead? That work has been stressful. I looked at the coffee between my hands. Another cover story. I know. Ryan's voice was quiet. I hated myself the second I said it. I do not want you to hate yourself. Then what am I supposed to do? Tell the truth when you are ready to live with it. He looked frustrated. And if I am never ready? That question settled heavily between us. I had spent months believing readiness was somewhere in Ryan's future, something that would eventually arrive if I loved him patiently enough. Hearing him say never made me understand that waiting could become its own decision. Then I cannot stay here forever, I said. Ryan went completely still. Are you ending this? I do not know. Noah. I love you, Ryan, but I am tired. My voice shook slightly despite how hard I tried to keep it steady. I am tired of being introduced as your friend. I am tired of watching you check who is around before you reach for me. I am tired of hearing you tell people you are single and then coming home with you like those words did not happen. Ryan looked down. I thought loving you privately was better than losing you completely. Maybe for you. He raised his eyes. What does that mean? It means you get both lives. You get me here, where nobody sees us, and you get the version of yourself everyone else already understands. I am the one who has to disappear whenever those lives overlap. Ryan had no answer. I stood and walked toward the window. Snow collected along the fire escape outside. After a long silence, he said, "What if I need more time?" I turned toward him. "Then take it." His face softened with relief until I finished. "But I cannot promise I will still be waiting when you decide you are ready." Ryan stared at me, and I saw the exact moment he understood that my patience was not unlimited. I was not threatening him. I was finally telling him the truth he had been too afraid to hear. Love had given us 11 months together, but love could not keep asking one of us to become invisible so the other never had to be uncomfortable. Ryan stayed at my kitchen table for another minute, staring at the untouched coffee he had brought me. Then he stood and put on his coat. I expected another promise, another apology, maybe another request for patience, but he only said, "I understand." I was not sure he did, but I nodded anyway. At the door, he looked back at me. "I love you. I love you too." For the first time, those words did not solve anything. Ryan left, and I listened to his footsteps disappear down the hallway. The next morning, there was no message waiting on my phone. There was no reminder to eat breakfast, no joke about Chicago traffic, no photograph of whatever terrible coffee his office had provided. I told myself the silence was what I had asked for. By Friday evening, I had almost convinced myself I was fine. I worked late, picked up dinner on the way home, and spent an hour reorganizing files I had already organized twice. Then I opened my kitchen cabinet and saw the black travel mug Ryan had left there weeks earlier. I stood looking at it longer than I wanted to admit. Missing him did not mean my boundary was wrong. That was the hardest lesson of the entire week. On Saturday afternoon, Ryan called. I watched his name on the screen until the final ring, then answered. "Hi. Hi." His voice sounded tired. "Can we meet somewhere?" "Where?" "The coffee shop near your studio. Public place. No hiding." I understood what he was trying to say, and despite myself, I smiled slightly. "Give me 20 minutes. When I arrived, Ryan was sitting near the front window. He did not choose the secluded table in the back where we usually sat. He had chosen one visible from the sidewalk. It was a tiny gesture, but I noticed. I sat across from him. "I talked to Emily," he said. My chest tightened. "Really talked to her?" "Yes." Ryan wrapped both hands around his coffee. "I told her I have been seeing someone for almost a year." He paused. "I told her his name is Noah." I forgot to breathe for a second. "What did she say?" First she stared at me. Then she asked if you were the Noah from Mom's birthday. A nervous laugh escaped him. I said yes. "And?" She asked why I had never told her. Ryan looked down. "I told her because I was scared." "How did she react?" "She said she wished I had trusted her sooner." Something inside me softened, but I reminded myself that one conversation did not erase 11 months. "I am glad you told her." Ryan nodded. "I am not telling you because I expect anything." "Then why are you telling me?" He met my eyes. "Because you were right. I kept treating honesty like something I was supposed to do for you. That made every conversation feel like a test I could fail. But this is my life. I am the one who has to decide whether I want to spend it hiding." For several seconds, I said nothing. This was different from his previous apologies. There was no request attached. "What happens now?" I asked. "I keep going. With us." Ryan shook his head gently. "With telling the truth. Whether you stay with me or not." That answer hurt and comforted me at the same time. I reached into my coat pocket and placed his apartment key on the table. Ryan stared at it. "Noah, I am not punishing you." My throat tightened. "But I think we need to stop being together for now." He looked devastated, yet he did not argue. "Okay." I stood, and Ryan stood too, but neither of us moved closer. "I hope you become the person you want to be," I said. His eyes stayed on mine. "I hope someday you get to meet him." I walked toward the door before I could change my mind. Outside, Chicago was cold and bright beneath a pale winter sky. I loved Ryan. I knew he loved me. But for the first time in 11 months, I understood that sometimes walking away from love was not giving up on it. Sometimes it was refusing to disappear inside it. The first week without Ryan felt strangely ordinary, which somehow made it worse. Chicago kept moving as if nothing important had happened. Clients still emailed revisions before breakfast, trains still rattled past crowded platforms, and my neighborhood coffee shop still handed me the same order every morning. I worked, ate, slept, and tried not to measure my days by the messages that no longer arrived. Ryan respected the distance. Completely. He did not call. He did not appear at my apartment. He did not send flowers or write some dramatic apology designed to pull me back. At first, his silence hurt. Then I understood it was another form of respect. I had asked for space, and for once, he was not letting his fear decide what I needed. About 2 weeks after our breakup, Emily sent me a message. She did not mention Ryan directly. She simply thanked me for the drawing tablet recommendation and asked whether I knew a good beginner illustration program. I answered her question and left it there. A few minutes later, another message appeared. For what it is worth, I am glad my brother finally told me the truth. I stared at those words for a long time before replying. So am I. She did not tell me anything else, and I did not ask. Whatever Ryan chose to do next had to belong to him. Meanwhile, I started rebuilding routines that were entirely mine. I joined 2 coworkers for trivia on Thursday nights. I spent Saturdays working on a personal illustration series I had abandoned months earlier. I called my parents more often. None of those things erased Ryan, but they reminded me that my life had never been waiting inside his apartment for permission to become visible. Then, one cold Tuesday evening, I stopped at a grocery store near my studio. I reached automatically for Ryan's favorite coffee before realizing I had no reason to buy it anymore. I stood there with the bag in my hand and laughed quietly at myself. 11 months had created hundreds of habits that did not disappear just because the relationship ended. I put the coffee back and continued shopping. Later that night, Ryan finally sent a message. I hope you are doing okay. You do not need to answer. I just wanted you to know I told my parents tonight. My heart started pounding. I read the sentence 3 times. Every part of me wanted details, but I remembered what Ryan had said at the coffee shop. He was going to keep telling the truth whether I returned or not. I waited several minutes before replying. I hope you are okay too. His answer came quickly. I am. It was difficult, but I am. I set my phone down, determined not to turn. His decision into a doorway back into our relationship. 10 minutes later, another message appeared. My mother asked if Noah was the man I loved. I told her yes. I closed my eyes. For months, I had imagined hearing those words as some enormous victory. Instead, they made me unexpectedly sad because I had wanted to be beside him when he became brave enough to say them. Then I realized that was exactly why I could not have been there. Ryan needed to learn that honesty was not something he performed to keep me. It was something he chose because he no longer wanted to divide himself into separate lives. I typed a response, deleted it, then tried again. Thank you for telling them the truth. Ryan replied. Thank you for making me understand why I needed to. I looked around my apartment at the quiet life I was rebuilding and understood something I had not expected. I still loved Ryan, but I no longer needed that love to rescue either of us. If our paths ever came together again, it could not be because I had waited for him to change. It would have to be because he changed for himself, and because I freely chose the man standing on the other side of that truth. 3 more weeks passed before I saw Ryan again. By then, February had softened slightly, although Chicago still seemed determined to remind everyone that winter was not finished. I had just left my studio on a Friday evening when I noticed him across the street outside a small restaurant. He was standing with Emily and another man I recognized from photographs as one of his longtime friends. Ryan saw me almost immediately. For one awkward second, neither of us moved. Then Emily noticed where he was looking and smiled at me. I crossed at the light, telling myself this was simply a coincidence. Hey, Ryan said. Hey. Emily greeted me warmly, then introduced Ryan's friend, Marcus. Before I could wonder what Marcus knew about me, he smiled and said, So you are Noah? Ryan has told me a lot about you. I looked at Ryan. There was no panic in his expression, no silent request for me to follow a cover story. Hopefully nothing too embarrassing, I said. Marcus laughed. Mostly that you are the only person who ever convinced him to replace that terrible couch. Ryan shook his head. I like that couch. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but something about it felt enormous. Nobody called me Ryan's friend. Nobody invented an explanation for why he knew me. My history with him simply existed in the open. When Emily and Marcus went inside, Ryan stayed on the sidewalk. "I told Marcus last week," he said. "I figured. I also told 2 people at work." That surprised me. "How did that go?" "One said he had assumed I was dating someone because I stopped accepting every invitation to work late." Ryan smiled faintly. "The other apologized because she had tried to set me up with her cousin." I laughed before I could stop myself. Ryan's smile became warmer. "My father is still processing everything. I am sorry." "Do not be. He has not been cruel. He just has questions, and some of them are awkward. Mom keeps telling him to stop turning every conversation into an interview." "That sounds like your mother." Ryan looked at me for a moment. "She asked about you again." My chest tightened. "What did you say?" "I told her we are not together right now." "Right now?" I noticed the words but did not challenge them. "Thank you for being honest. I am trying to make that my default." There was no dramatic pride in his voice. If anything, he sounded humbled by how ordinary honesty could be once he stopped running from it. "How are you?" he asked. "Good. Busy. I started working on my own illustration series again." "The neighborhood portraits?" I blinked. "You remembered." Of course I remembered. That simple answer carried more emotion than I expected. Ryan had always remembered the details of my life. His problem had never been loving me. It had been allowing that love to exist where other people could see it. "I should let you get back to dinner," I said. "Yeah." Neither of us moved. Finally, Ryan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. My apartment key was still on his old key ring. I realized I never gave this back. He placed it in my palm. I did not want to mail it. I closed my fingers around it. "Thanks." Ryan nodded and stepped back. "Good night." "Noah." "Good night, Ryan." I watched him enter the restaurant, then continued toward the train. My heart felt strangely light. Ryan had introduced the truth into his life one conversation at a time, and none of it had been done in front of me for applause. For the first time, I could imagine believing his change without needing to supervise it. What I could not yet decide was whether believing him meant I was ready to trust him with my heart again. For the next several days, I kept thinking about the conversation outside the restaurant. Nothing Ryan had told me was extraordinary. He had spoken honestly to his sister, his parents, a longtime friend, and a few coworkers. These were ordinary conversations most people would never consider milestones. For Ryan, they represented doors he had spent years refusing to open. What mattered to me was that he was opening them without asking whether I would be waiting on the other side. The following Thursday, Emily invited me to meet her for coffee near my studio. I almost declined because I did not want her becoming a messenger between Ryan and me, but she made her intentions clear within 5 minutes of sitting down. "Ryan does not know I asked you here," she said. "Good, because I do not want updates about him." "I know." She smiled. "I wanted to apologize." "For what?" "For all those times I called you his friend without realizing what was actually happening." I shook my head. "You did not know." "Exactly. He never gave me the chance to know." Her words echoed something I had told Ryan after his mother's birthday. Emily stirred her coffee. "For what it is worth, he is different lately." "Emily, I am not trying to convince you to take him back." "Okay. Actually, I think breaking up with him was probably the first thing anyone has done in years that he could not solve by working harder or being charming." I laughed despite myself. "That sounds harsh. I am his sister. I earned the right." We talked about other things after that, and when we separated, I felt strangely peaceful. Ryan's family was not perfect. His father still needed time. Emily had admitted that their mother had cried, partly from surprise and partly because she wished Ryan had trusted them sooner. There had been uncomfortable questions and long conversations. Yet the catastrophe Ryan had imagined for years had not arrived. 2 weeks later, my studio received an invitation to a spring networking reception hosted by several Chicago marketing firms. Ryan's company was one of them. My first instinct was to skip it, but my creative director wanted me there because 2 potential clients had specifically asked about my work. So on Thursday evening, I entered a downtown event space wearing a navy blazer and reminding myself that I was there professionally. I saw Ryan almost immediately. He was talking with 3 coworkers near the bar. He saw me too, smiled, and gave me a small nod without approaching. I appreciated that. For nearly an hour, we stayed in separate circles. Then I found myself speaking with a woman I recognized from the November gala. She remembered my restaurant branding project and asked how it had turned out. While we talked, Ryan joined the group. My body tensed automatically, remembering the last time the three of us had shared a room. The woman smiled at Ryan. I was just telling Noah that you two seem to know all the same people. Ryan glanced at me. Months earlier, I would have recognized the fear behind his eyes. This time, there was none. We know each other pretty well, he said. She laughed. You always say that. Are you ever going to tell us who you are actually dating? The room did not become silent. Nobody turned toward him. No dramatic spotlight appeared. It was simply a question in the middle of an ordinary conversation. Ryan took a breath. I was dating someone, he said. His name is Noah. The woman looked from him to me, surprised for only a moment. Ryan continued before I could react. I loved him, and I made the mistake of keeping that part of my life hidden because I was afraid of what people might think. My heart pounded, but Ryan was not looking at me for approval. He was looking at her because she was the person he was answering. We are not together now, he added. But I am done pretending he was ever just my friend. She nodded slowly. Thank you for telling me. Then, someone asked Ryan about an upcoming campaign, and the conversation moved on. That was all. No disaster. No applause. Just truth, spoken in the same room where a lie had once broken something between us. When Ryan eventually looked at me, I realized the most important difference was not that everyone finally knew. It was that he no longer seemed afraid of being known. After the reception, I stayed another 40 minutes because leaving immediately would have felt like running from something I had spent months asking Ryan to face. We did not speak again until I stepped outside. The March air was cold enough that I pulled my coat tighter while waiting for my rideshare. Noah. I turned and found Ryan walking toward me. He stopped several feet away, leaving the distance for me to decide. I wanted to make sure you were okay, he said. I am. I did not know you would be there tonight. I know. He slipped his hands into his coat pockets. I hope what I said did not put you in an uncomfortable position. Months earlier, Ryan had worried about other people discovering the truth. Now he was worried about whether telling it had affected me. That difference mattered. It surprised me, I admitted. But you did not say anything that was not true. Ryan nodded. Traffic moved along the wet street behind him. I need you to know something. I waited. I did not tell those people because I thought you were watching. I know. And I am not doing any of this to earn you back. That sentence hurt more than I expected, but it also made me trust him more. Then why are you doing it? Ryan looked toward the buildings across the street before answering. Because I finally understood what I was protecting. What do you mean? I thought I was protecting my career, my family, the way people saw me. But mostly I was protecting myself from uncomfortable conversations. He gave a small, embarrassed smile. I built this huge disaster in my head, and then I used it to justify hurting someone I loved. I stayed quiet. Telling Emily did not fix everything, he continued. Telling my parents did not fix everything. My dad and I still have conversations that make both of us uncomfortable. Some coworkers reacted awkwardly. One person asked a question that made me want to disappear. He looked at me again. But I survived all of it. And every time I tell the truth, I feel less like I am managing two different versions of myself. My rideshare notification appeared on my phone, saying the car was 6 minutes away. For once, I was grateful for the delay. I am proud of you, I said. Ryan's expression softened. Thank you. But I am still scared. Of me. Of believing this is permanent. Ryan nodded immediately. That is fair. I spent almost a year learning that whenever another person entered the room, I became your friend. That does not disappear because you changed over a few months. I know. He did not defend himself. He did not tell me how hard he had worked. He simply accepted the consequence. You do not owe me forgiveness, he said. Coming out was never supposed to be a payment that bought our relationship back. I felt something inside me loosen. That was the sentence I had needed without knowing it. Then what happens if I never come back? Ryan swallowed. I will be heartbroken. His voice remained steady. But I will still be glad I stopped hiding. My car appeared at the curb. I opened the rear door, then hesitated. Ryan. Yeah. Would you like to get coffee with me Sunday? Surprise crossed his face, followed by a smile he tried unsuccessfully to hide. As friends. The question could have hurt, but this time there was gentle humor in it. I smiled too. As two people having coffee. No labels yet. I can do that. I got into the car and closed the door. As we pulled away, I looked back and saw Ryan standing beneath the streetlight. I was not ready to give him my heart again. But for the first time since I had handed back his apartment key, I was ready to find out whether the man who once hid our relationship could learn how to build one with nothing left to hide. Sunday coffee lasted almost 3 hours. We talked about ordinary things first because ordinary felt safe. Ryan told me his team had finally approved the campaign that had consumed most of his winter. I showed him photographs of the neighborhood, portrait series I had been working on, and he remembered enough about the original idea to ask whether I had kept the hand-drawn lettering. I had. Neither of us tried to turn the afternoon into a reunion. When we left, Ryan walked with me for 4 blocks before we separated at the train station. He did not reach for my hand, and strangely, that restraint made me trust him more. Over the next month, coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekend walks along the lakefront, and eventually I stopped counting how many times we had seen each other. Ryan never pressured me to define what we were rebuilding. More importantly, I began seeing his new honesty when he had no reason to perform it for me. One afternoon, we were standing in line at a bakery when one of his coworkers approached us. Ryan introduced me simply as Noah and continued the conversation without becoming tense or creating distance between us. Another evening, Emily joined us for dinner and openly complained that Ryan had stolen my recommendation for a restaurant and claimed it as his own. Nobody edited their words. Nobody acted as though there was a dangerous truth hiding beneath the table. It felt almost ridiculously normal, and that normalcy was exactly what I had wanted. Near the end of April, Ryan invited me to his parents' house for Sunday dinner. I hesitated before accepting. The last time I had been there, I had watched him step away from me before a family photograph. When we arrived in Evanston, his mother hugged me at the door. His father greeted me warmly but somewhat awkwardly, which I appreciated more than artificial enthusiasm. During dinner, nobody made a speech. His mother asked about my work. Emily teased Ryan. His father asked whether I still followed baseball, apparently remembering a conversation we had months earlier. After dessert, his mother brought out her phone. I want a new family picture while everyone is here. My stomach tightened automatically. We gathered near the fireplace, almost exactly where we had stood at her birthday. I found myself beside Ryan. For a second, the old memory returned with uncomfortable clarity. His shoulder against mine, his glance toward the camera, then those few deliberate inches of distance. Ryan looked at me now, and I wondered whether he remembered too. He did not move away. Instead, he quietly asked, "Is this okay?" The question mattered more than the photograph. I nodded. Ryan remained beside me, our shoulders touching naturally as Emily complained that everyone was taking too long. The camera flashed. Nothing dramatic happened. His father did not look away. His mother did not cry. The room did not change. We were simply standing together in a photograph, and for the first time, Ryan did not need to erase the space we occupied. Later, while we walked toward his car, he said, "I know one picture does not fix the old one." "No," I said. "It does not." He nodded, accepting that without disappointment. I stopped beside the passenger door. "But it means something." Ryan looked at me carefully. "What does it mean?" I thought about the months we had spent apart, the conversations he had faced without knowing whether they would bring me back, and the quiet patience he had shown since we started seeing each other again. "It means I believe you are changing because you want this life to be honest, not because you are trying to convince me." Ryan's eyes softened. "That is exactly why." I reached for his hand. It was the first time I had done that since our breakup. Ryan looked down at our joined hands, then back at me, but he did not turn the moment into something larger than I was ready for. He simply held on. Standing there beneath the soft evening light, I realized trust had not returned in one dramatic moment. It had returned in small pieces, each one created by a choice Ryan made when hiding would have been easier. And for the first time, I was beginning to believe there might be enough pieces to build something new. By early June, Ryan and I had stopped pretending we were only testing the possibility of being together again. There had been no grand reconciliation, no single conversation where every old wound disappeared. Instead, there were Sunday breakfasts, evening walks beside Lake Michigan, dinners with Emily, and ordinary nights when Ryan called simply because he wanted to hear my voice. Trust returned slowly enough that I could recognize every piece of it. One Saturday, Ryan invited me to a small backyard gathering at Marcus's house on the north side. A year earlier, An invitation like that would have required negotiations about what we were allowed to be in front of everyone. This time, Ryan only asked whether I wanted him to pick me up. When we arrived, Marcus greeted us at the gate and immediately complained that Ryan had brought sparkling water instead of the soda he requested. "You told me to bring drinks," Ryan said. "Those are drinks. This is why I like Noah better." I laughed as Ryan shook his head. The afternoon was easy. Nobody watched us. Nobody seemed interested in turning our relationship into a subject. We talked about work, baseball, terrible apartment rents, and where Marcus should order pizza from later. At some point, I realized Ryan's hand was resting beside mine on the patio table. Neither of us had checked who might notice. That small realization nearly meant more than every difficult conversation that had brought us there. Later, another couple arrived. I recognized one of them from Ryan's company, but I had never met the other man. Marcus introduced everyone until the newcomer looked toward me. "And you are?" For the briefest second, an old instinct returned. I remembered hotel lights, Ryan telling me not to call him my boyfriend, and standing 3 feet away while he told someone he was single. Ryan turned toward me. There was no panic in his face now. No calculation. No glance around the yard. He smiled and said, "This is Noah, my boyfriend." 3 ordinary words. That was all. The man smiled, shook my hand, and introduced himself. Conversation continued. Nobody stopped. Nobody stared. Ryan did not look at me expecting praise. He had simply told the truth because the truth had finally become the easiest answer. A few minutes later, I touched his arm. "Boyfriend?" I asked quietly. His confidence disappeared immediately. Was that too much? I should have asked. I smiled. "No, I just wanted to hear you say it again." Ryan laughed softly. "My boyfriend." "Better." He looked at me with an expression I had missed more than I realized. Are we really doing this again? I thought about the question. We were not returning to the relationship we had before. I did not want that relationship back. That version of us had required me to shrink whenever Ryan became afraid. What we had now had been rebuilt through uncomfortable truths, boundaries, time apart, and choices neither of us could make for the other. "No," I said. Ryan's smile faded until I continued. "We are doing it differently." Relief crossed his face. "I can live with differently." I reached for his hand openly. "Good, because I am not going back to being your secret." Ryan closed his fingers around mine. "You never will be again." I believed him, not because he promised it, but because I had watched him become someone who no longer needed the promise. As evenings settled over Chicago, we remained beside each other while conversations continued around us. Nothing about the moment looked extraordinary from the outside. That was exactly what made it extraordinary to me. For almost a year, I had wanted Ryan to love me where life could see us. Now he did, and the truth was no longer a confession, a confrontation, or something he had to gather courage to say. It was simply our life.